The blizzard came down like God's fist. Through the white wall of that fist, Cole Dawson saw her fall. He'd been riding fence line, his knuckles numb, checking posts before the storm buried the world. The wind didn't just blow, it screamed, a high, thin sound like wounded wolves, tearing at the seams of his coat, trying to get at the man inside. It froze the breath in his lungs. The temperature wasn't just dropping, it was plummeting. The sky was a bruised, sick purple gray, pressing down on the Montana territory like a heavy steel lid on a pot, and whatever was inside was about to boil over. Then movement. A dark shape 50 yards out, near his boundary marker. A shape that stumbled, fought, and then collapsed. Cole didn't hesitate. You don't out here. You move or you die. He kicked his horse, a beast as tough as the land itself, and plunged forward. The snow wasn't falling anymore. It was moving sideways, horizontal, like a solid thing. It blinded him, ice crusting his beard in seconds, stinging his eyes. He reached her. She was face down, one arm stretched out, fingers clawing at the snow like she'd been reaching for something that was never there. A fine leather coat, soaked through, useless. Her hair, dark, was frozen solid to her neck. He swung down from the saddle, his legs stiff. He rolled her over. Dead weight, but not dead. Her breath was a shallow, rattling thing, a sound like thin ice cracking. "Come on now," he muttered, his own voice ripped away by the wind. He hauled her up, a clumsy, desperate motion, draping her across his saddle like a sack of feed. "You didn't ride all the way out here just to die on my fence line." He grabbed the reins and the storm swallowed them whole. Visibility was zero. Not just bad. It was gone. Cole navigated by faith, by instinct. He was counting fence posts he couldn't even see, trusting the memory in his bones, trusting his horse to find the path home. The wind screamed and the snow turned from flakes to tiny sharp knives of glass. His cabin didn't appear. It just suddenly was. A dark, solid square against the swirling white chaos. He didn't bother with the handle. He kicked the door open. He carried her inside, the sudden silence of the cabin deafening, and laid her near the cold stone of the fireplace. Her lips were blue. Not pale. Blue. Her body was shivering, a violent rattling quake that shook the floorboards. It was hypothermia. Her body was trying to fight, and it was losing. Cole worked fast. His hands were shaking, not just from the cold, but from a desperate, sudden urgency. He built the fire high, using the last of his dry kindling. He didn't think, he just did. He stripped her wet coat off. Her boots. He was respectful, but he was desperate. There was no time for manners. He wrapped her in his only wool blanket, the one his mother had woven 20 years back. The last good thing he owned. She didn't wake. The shivering didn't stop. It just kept going, a terrible mechanical motion. He sat back against the far wall, his own body exhausted, the cold seeping into him now. He just watched her breathe. Outside, the storm screamed to be let in. Inside, the fire caught. Orange light danced across the rough timber walls, across the woman's still, pale face. She was alive. For now, that was enough. This land didn't forgive hesitation. It didn't care about your past, or your money, or your name. It only cared about what you did in the moment. You moved, or you died. Cole had moved. Now all he could do was wait. She woke to two things, the crackle of fire and the smell of coffee. It was a bitter, strong, real smell. Grace opened her eyes slow. The world was blurry, disoriented. Her entire body ached, a deep, bone-bruising pain like she'd been trampled. The room swam into focus. One room. Rough-hewn timber walls, a table with 2 chairs, shelves holding a few tin plates and not much else, a fireplace crackling with warmth. And a man. He was sitting across from her, just watching. Quiet. "Easy now," he said. His voice was low and rough, like stones rolling in a dry creek bed. "Steady, you had a close call out there." Grace tried to sit up. A mistake. Pain, sharp as a needle, shot through her ribs. She gasped, falling back. "Careful," the man said, standing. He wasn't tall, but he was solid. He moved with a kind of economy, no wasted motion. He poured coffee from a dented pot into a tin cup. He offered it to her. "Ain't much, but it's warm." She took it. Her hands were trembling so badly the coffee sloshed over the rim. The heat felt like life itself, seeping back into her fingers. She sighed. It was terrible. The coffee was burnt, strong enough to strip paint. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. Where am I?" Her voice was a dry croak. "My place. About 3 miles from town." He gestured with his chin to the single window, now a solid white square of packed snow. "Found you near my fence line. You've been out near 2 days." 2 days? Grace's mind spun. 2 days. Her father. Her father would be frantic. Or furious. Probably both. "What's your name?" the man asked. She hesitated. This was the moment. The pivot. If she told him who she really was. Grace Porter, daughter of Thomas Porter, the wealthiest, most powerful cattle baron in the entire territory. Everything would change. It always did. The kindness would curdle. It would turn into something else. Awe, or fear, or greed. "Grace," she said. Just that. Nothing more. He nodded, as if that was enough. He didn't push. Cole. Dawson. He put a plate of beans on the table. Simple food. He took half, a small portion. He pushed the other half toward her. It was only then she noticed. The shelves weren't just simple. They were empty. The roof was patched with old tin. A worn Bible, its spine broken, sat by the cot. He was sharing his last meal with a stranger. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet. He just nodded. "You'd have done the same." Grace looked away. She wasn't sure if that was true. She'd never had to be. She'd never been tested. Not like this. They ate in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was companionable. The silence of two people who had survived something together. The storm kept on through the night, a relentless, howling monster. Cole banked the fire, showing her how to keep it steady, how to make the wood last. She noticed his shirt. It was torn at the shoulder, patched badly with rough, uneven stitches. "Let me," she said. She reached for her saddlebag, which he'd brought in and set by the door. She pulled out a small leather roll. Thread and a needle. Small, fine things. Tools from a life he knew nothing about. She mended the tear while he tended the fire. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The small cabin was filled with the sound of the wind, the crackle of the fire, and the tiny, precise sound of a needle passing through cloth. When she finished, she handed it back. Their fingers touched. Just for a moment. A spark different from the fire. Warm. "You didn't have to do that," Cole said, his voice low. "You saved my life," Grace replied. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. "I don't know if I would have," she added, the admission so soft it was barely louder than the wind. "Done the same, I mean." Something passed between them. An understanding, a truth that neither of them could name. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire burned warm. Grace's hand instinctively went to her throat, to the locket hidden beneath her shirt. Gold, engraved, a locket worth more than this entire cabin. She hid it quick before he could see. She wasn't ready. Not yet. This man, this good man. He didn't know. He didn't know she was a lie. The storm left the world clean and quiet, like a second chance written in snow. Dawn came pale and cold. Grace woke to the sound of Cole making breakfast. More beans, weak coffee. Through the window, the world was a vast, unbroken white silence. Beautiful and deadly. Storm's broken, Cole said. He didn't look at her, just at the window. You'll want to get back. 'Fore another one rolls in. Grace nodded, though a strange, sharp part of her didn't want to leave. This cabin, this rough, poor, honest place. It felt safer than her father's mansion had ever felt. They ate together, one last time, the last of the beans. Can I ask you something? Grace said, the words surprising her. Cole looked up. How'd you end up here, alone, like this? He was quiet for a long moment. He stared into his empty tin cup as if reading a story there. Then he spoke, slow and careful, like a man unused to telling his own story. Lost my folks, landed in debt. About 5 years back. He stopped. Bank took it all. Now I work another man's cattle, live on the edge of his property. He looked at his hands, calloused, scarred, and strong. Townfolk, they call me worthless. Landowners, they won't give me the time of day. He finally met her eyes. But I got my word, and a man's word is all the wealth he really needs. Grace felt something inside her break. This man, this good, decent, honorable man. He had nothing, and he'd still saved her. He'd still shared his last meal without a second thought. She almost told him. The words were right there, on the tip of her tongue. I'm Grace Porter. My father owns half this territory. I can change your life. But fear stopped her. Cold. What if he changed? What if this kindness, this beautiful, simple, real kindness, what if it was only real because he didn't know who she was? What if gold ruined this too? The way it always ruined everything? If I could repay you, she started, her voice thick. Cole shook his head, a short, sharp motion. You don't owe me nothing. That's what neighbors do. She stood, gathering her things. Her coat was dry. He'd saddled a horse for her, one of the two he owned. He was lending it without asking for return. At the door, she turned back. You let me be the kind of man I want to be, Cole said quietly. That's payment enough. Grace mounted the horse. The cold air bit through her coat, a sharp reminder of the world she was returning to. She turned just once and looked back at the cabin. Cole stood on the porch, watching. Their eyes held just for a second. Something unspoken passed between them, something fragile and real and terribly dangerous. Then she rode away. Her hand went to her locket. The secret felt heavier now, like a stone she couldn't put down. Rich or poor, a blizzard buries all the same. But afterward, the world always remembered who you were. And Grace wasn't sure she wanted to be that person anymore. News travels faster than wildfire in a town that's got nothing better to burn. Grace returned to her father's estate 3 hours later. The ranch hands found her first. They were relieved then, anxious. They saw whose horse she was riding, a horse with Cole Dawson's simple D brand. Within an hour, the whole territory knew. The Porter heiress, saved by Cole Dawson, that broke rancher. The one with no land, no prospects, no future worth mentioning. The town split clean down the middle. Some folks, the good ones, admired Cole's courage. Takes a real man to ride into a storm like that, old Martha Doyle said at the Mercantile. She said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Others mocked him. Probably thought he'd get a reward, sneered Travis Dunn, leaning against the post office wall, spitting tobacco. Maybe marry up, another voice laughed. That's what poor men do. They wait for opportunity. Grace heard the talk. It made her sick. She tried to send a thank you gift. Not money. She knew somehow that would be an insult. She sent quality tools, a new axe, winter supplies, things he actually needed. She sent it with her father's top ranch hand, with specific orders. Deliver it quiet. Just leave it. But the hand was loyal to her father first, And her father wanted this. Embarrassment. Over. The hand delivered it publicly. It happened at the Mercantile Saturday afternoon. The whole town was watching. The ranch hand arrived with the wagon full of supplies. Cole was there, buying a small bag of grain he could barely afford. "Miss Porter sends her thanks," the hand said, his voice booming in the crowded store. He gestured to the shiny new tools, the bags of flour and salt. "Says you earned 'em." Cole looked at the tools. Good steel, months of wages, sitting right there. The whole store went silent. He just shook his head. "I didn't do it for pay." His voice was quiet, but in that silence it sounded like a gunshot. "Take them back." The crowd held its breath. Then a new voice spoke, a smooth, cold voice. "Mighty convenient," Warren Kent said, stepping forward. Warren was everything Cole wasn't. Wealthy, educated, entitled. He'd been courting Grace for 2 years, assuming, like everyone else, that her father would eventually arrange the match. Warren smiled, a cold, thin smile. "You being right there, Dawson. Right when she needed saving." Cole turned, slow. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. "Ain't nothing convenient about a blizzard, Kent." Still, Warren stepped closer, enjoying the audience. "She belongs with her own kind, not charity cases." The Mercantile held its breath. Cole met Warren's eyes. "I reckon," Cole said, his voice like gravel, "she belongs with whoever treats her like a person, not property." He paid for his grain. He walked out. The tools sat there on the wagon. Untouched, refused. Gold didn't keep you warm in a storm. Only fire and heart did that. But gold sure made people mean afterward. Cole rode home alone. The tools stayed in town, a public monument to the divide. That night, Cole sat on his porch and watched the sunset. The mountains burned orange and purple, beautiful and cold and indifferent. He thought about Grace. He wondered if she'd heard what Warren said, wondered if she agreed. Probably didn't matter. Rich folk and poor folk. They didn't mix. Never had. Never would. But for 2 days in that storm, none of it had mattered. And Cole couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd mended his shirt, the care in her hands, the quiet between them that had felt, for a moment, like home. He went inside. He closed the door. Outside, the cold settled in. Grace rode out before dawn, before her father could stop her, before she could stop herself. She saddled her own horse, quiet, and slipped out through the back gate. The ranch hands, the ones who'd known her since she was a girl, they pretended not to see. They liked her. They knew she was different from her father. The ride to Cole's place took an hour. The sunrise caught her halfway, spilling pink and gold across the mountains, making the snow glitter like a carpet of broken stars. She found him in the corral, mending fence. He looked up when he heard the hooves. Surprise flickered across his face. Then something else, something warmer. He set down his tools, wiped his hands on his pants, a gesture of a man who wasn't used to company. "Wasn't expecting company," Cole said. His voice was guarded. "I wanted to thank you properly," Grace said, dismounting, "since you wouldn't take the tools. Told you, don't need thanks." "I know." She stepped closer. The air was cold, and she could see her breath. "But I wanted to see you again." That hung between them. Honest. Raw. Cole nodded once, toward the cabin. "Coffee's on." They walked together. Grace watched the way he moved. Economical, purposeful. A man who'd learned to make do with very little. Inside, she looked around properly this time. She saw the details. The single chair, hand-carved. The shelf holding exactly 3 books. The worn Bible, an almanac, and a small book of poetry. The window placed perfectly to catch the morning light. You built this yourself? She asked. Most of it. Took 2 years. Grace ran her hand along the table, smooth, solid. It's beautiful. Cole poured the coffee. It was still terrible. It was still wonderful. They sat across from each other just like they had during the storm. What do you dream about, Cole? Grace asked, the question sudden, even to her. He blinked. What? When you're out here, mending fence, riding alone. What do you dream about? He was quiet for a long, long time. Used to dream about land, he said, his voice low. Having my own place. Something to pass on to my kids someday. He looked down at his coffee. Now I just want to be the kind of man worth remembering. Grace felt that crack open inside her again. Here was a man, with nothing, who dreamed only of being good. You don't know who I am, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Cole looked at her. His eyes were clear and steady. I know enough. I know you mended my shirt. I know you weren't afraid to work beside me during the storm. That's plenty. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to confess everything. The wealth, the expectations, the golden cage her life had become. But Cole stood up, breaking the spell. He gestured to the corral. Come on, I'll show you something. They walked outside. The sun was higher now, warming the air. He led her to the fence line and showed her the cattle grazing in the valley below. Not mine, he said, but I take care of 'em like they are. That matters. They stood there, shoulders almost touching, looking out over the land. Grace looked at him. Really looked. She saw the lines around his eyes from squinting into sun and snow. She saw the small scar on his jaw. She saw the quiet, unbreakable strength in the way he stood. Cole, she said. He turned. Their faces were close, too close. For a moment the whole world held its breath. The air was charged. Then Cole stepped back. I should get back to work. Grace nodded, her throat tight. I should go. They walked to her horse in silence. She mounted, looked down at him. Thank you, she said, for everything. Any time. She rode away. This time she didn't look back. But on the ridge, as she topped the rise, her father's men were watching. 2 riders, dark shapes against the bright sky. Grace saw them. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't over, not by half. A man can stand a lot. Poverty, weather, loneliness. Cole Dawson knew all 3. But shame. Shame delivered in public. That cuts deepest. Cole walked into the Mercantile the next Saturday. He needed nails. The place was crowded. Folks picking up supplies, gossiping, killing time before Sunday service. He felt the shift when he walked in. Conversation stopped. Eyes turned. Warren Kent was standing near the counter, surrounded by other landowners. Men with money. Land. Power. Well now, Warren said, his voice loud, carrying across the room. Look who it is, the town hero. Cole ignored him. He walked to the counter. Box of nails, please. The storekeeper hesitated. He glanced at Warren. Must be nice, Warren continued, walking closer. Getting attention from the Porter girl. I'm sure you worked real hard for that. Laughter ripped through the store. Ugly, knowing laughter. Cole's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes on the counter. Warren stepped right up to him. We all know what you were hoping for, Dawson. Marrying into money. That's how poor men climb, right? Find a rich woman, make her feel sorry for you. That ain't what happened, Cole said, his voice dangerously quiet. No? Warren smiled. Then what did happen in that cabin, Dawson? 2 days, all alone, storm raging. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, poison-filled whisper. Must have been cozy. The room went dead silent. Cole turned, slow. His hands were fists at his sides, but his voice His voice stayed level. I saved her life, that's all. Don't make it dirty. Dirty. Warren laughed, a loud braying sound. You took advantage of a situation. She was vulnerable, scared, and you. Enough. The voice cracked through the tension like a whip. Old Martha Doyle pushed through the crowd. She was bent with age, but her eyes were as fierce as a hawk's. She planted herself right between Cole and Warren. Funny, Martha said, her voice cutting. Cole Dawson's the only man in this town who didn't ask for a reward, didn't boast, didn't expect nothing. Maybe that's what scares you, Warren. She poked a bony finger at Warren's chest. A man who don't need to take. Warren's smile faltered. Two older ranchers, men who'd been silent, stepped forward. They didn't say anything. They just stood, one on either side of Cole, silent solidarity. But the damage was done. The words were out there. The poison was spreading. Cole paid for his nails. He walked out. Behind him, he heard Warren say, "She'll come to her senses. Rich girls always do." Cole rode home in silence. That night he sat by the fire, staring at the shirt Grace had mended. The stitches were small, careful. She'd taken her time. He'd heard the talk, heard that Grace hadn't defended him, heard that her father, Thomas Porter, had forbidden her from embarrassing the family by associating with him. Cole understood. He did. She had a life, a world he didn't fit into. 2 days in a storm didn't change that. He folded the shirt, careful, and set it aside. Outside, the snow began to fall again, a light spring snow, but the cabin felt emptier than it ever had. This territory didn't suffer fools, but it rewarded hypocrites just fine. Cole wasn't a hypocrite, never had been. But he was alone. Maybe that's all he was meant for. He banked the fire and climbed into his cot. Tomorrow he'd ride fence line. He'd do his work. He'd keep his word. That was enough. It had to be. A man could lose his land, his money, his name. But if he lost faith in himself, that was a death that didn't even need burying. Cole sat in his cabin for 3 days. He just sat. The shirt Grace had mended lay folded on the table. He couldn't stop looking at it. It was proof. Proof that something real had happened. Or had it. Maybe Warren was right. Maybe he'd been a fool, thinking someone like Grace Porter, someone with that much, could ever see him as anything but charity. A story to tell at her fancy dinners. The poor, simple rancher who saved me. Cole stood. He paced the small cabin. 1, 2, 3, turn. 1, 2, 3, turn. He thought about leaving. Just riding. Starting over somewhere new where nobody knew his name. Montana was big. A man could disappear. He was reaching for his coat when someone knocked. A sharp, impatient knock. He opened the door. Martha Doyle stood on his porch, a basket in her hand. "Evening, Cole." "Martha." She pushed right past him, set the basket on his table. Biscuits, still warm. "You planning on sulking much longer?" she asked. "Ain't sulking. You're a terrible liar, Cole Dawson." She sat, uninvited, at his table. "That girl's been asking about you. Every day, you know." Cole looked up. Sharp. "What?" "Grace Porter. Comes into town, just for supplies. Asks how you're doing. Quiet like. But she asks." Martha fixed him with a hard look. "Her father. He's forbidden her from seeing you, and Warren Kent. He's been pressuring Porter to arrange the marriage. Fast. The whole town's watching." "Then why are you telling me this?" Cole's voice was rough. "Because you're giving up." Martha leaned forward, her eyes bright. "Rich folk and poor folk, they don't mix easy. Lord knows that's true. But maybe that's why it matters. Doing the hard thing. The right thing. She didn't defend me. She couldn't, Martha snapped. Not without losing everything. Not without him running you out of the territory. Don't you see? Her father holds all the cards. She stood, her small frame rigid. But that don't mean she don't care. She left the biscuits. She walked to the door. Courage ain't the absence of fear, son, she said, not looking back. It's saddling up anyway. The door closed. Cole sat alone with the warm biscuits and his cold thoughts. Meanwhile, at the Porter estate, Grace was packing a small bag. Her father had laid down the law at dinner. His voice had been cold, final. You will not see that man again. You will accept Warren Kent's proposal. This embarrassment ends now. Grace had sat silent. She'd let him talk. Then she'd stood, excused herself, and gone to her room. Now she stuffed clothes into a saddlebag. Not many. Just enough. She left the jewelry, the fine dresses. She took only what mattered. Her father's voice echoed from downstairs. "Grace, come down here!" She ignored him. She climbed out her window, dropped the 2 feet to the ground. Her horse was tied behind the barn. She'd planned this all day. She rode into the night. But she didn't ride to Cole's cabin. Not yet. First, she had something to do. The church was dark and cold. Grace lit a single candle. She knelt at the rail. "I don't know if this is right," she whispered to the shadows. "But I know what's wrong. And staying silent, that's wrong." She stayed until the candle burned low. Then she rode home. Her father was waiting on the porch, a dark silhouette. "Where were you?" "Praying." He studied her face in the moonlight. He must have seen something there, something new, something unbreakable. "Grace." "I'm not marrying Warren," she said, her voice quiet but clear as a bell. "And I'm not ashamed of Cole Dawson. He saved my life when he had every reason to let me die. That's worth more than all your land." Her father's face went red, then pale. "You're confused. Gratitude isn't love." "Maybe not," Grace said, "but it's a better foundation than money." She walked past him into the house and went to her room. She locked the door. Outside, the snow fell, soft and steady. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she'd ride to Cole's cabin. Tomorrow she'd speak her truth. Tonight, she had made her choice. And Grace Porter didn't make choices lightly. Some moments don't ask for permission. They just demand you show up and be counted. Sunday morning. The whole town gathered after church, standing in loose groups outside the building. The air was cold, but the sunlight was bright. Everyone was talking low, the way people do when they're waiting for something to happen. Grace stood with her father and Warren Kent. Her father's hand was on her arm, not rough, but firm, possessive. Warren was smiling, that cold, thin smile. "We'll make the announcement today," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Simple ceremony. Next month." Grace said nothing. She just watched the road. And then he appeared. Cole Dawson. He rode in slow, sat tall in the saddle. His horse was old. His coat was patched. But he carried himself like a man with nothing left to lose. The crowd went silent. Cole dismounted. He walked straight toward Grace. People parted like water. Warren stepped forward. "You got some nerve, Dawson." "I ain't talking to you," Cole said. He stopped right in front of Grace. He met her eyes. "I ain't got land," Cole said. His voice was steady, clear, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I ain't got gold, but I know what I did, and I'd do it again for any soul caught in that storm." The crowd leaned in. "You want to judge me for that? Go ahead." Cole looked around at the faces, hostile, curious, moved. "But don't you dare say I wanted something from her. All I ever wanted was for her to live." Silence. A heavy, perfect silence. Then Grace stepped forward. "He's right. Her voice shook, but she kept going. "And I am ashamed. Ashamed that I let you make him feel small. For being good." She reached up. Her hands were steady. She unclasped the locket from her throat. The gold locket, the one worth more than Cole's cabin. She handed it to her father. "Keep your inheritance," Grace said. "I choose him." Warren grabbed her arm. "You're making a mistake." Cole moved. Not violent, just steady. He stepped right between them. "Let her go." Warren's hand dropped. The town held its breath. Then Martha Doyle stepped forward. She stood right next to Cole. Then the two old ranchers from the mercantile. Then a young couple holding a baby. Then more. One by one, people moved. They formed a line beside Cole and Grace. Silent solidarity. Grace's father looked at the crowd. He looked at his daughter. Something in his face shifted. Broke. Shame. Or maybe the beginning of understanding. "You want him?" her father said, his voice rough. "You got him. But don't expect my help." Grace met his eyes. "I don't need your help, father. I need a man who knows what matters." Warren turned, his face white with rage, and walked away. The crowd watched him go. Cole looked at Grace. "You sure about this?" "More sure," she said, "than I've ever been about anything." He took her hand, not gentle, firm, real. "Then let's go home." They walked to his horse together. The crowd watched, some smiling, some shaking their heads, all of them, witnessing. Cole helped Grace mount. She settled behind him, her arms wrapping around his waist. They rode out, slow. Behind them, Grace's father stood alone, watching them disappear toward the mountains. Martha walked up beside him. "You raised a good woman, Thomas." He didn't answer. He just stood there, the gold locket heavy in his hand. A man's word was his bond, and a town's silence was its shame. But today the town had spoken, and love, the hard-earned kind, had won. They said a blizzard showed you who a man really was. But the spring showed you what he was made of. 2 months later, Grace stood in the garden she'd planted. She watched the first wildflowers push up through the thawed ground, tiny, stubborn blooms, purple and yellow against the brown earth. Beautiful, because they'd survived. The cabin had grown. Cole had built an addition. One more room, small but solid. She'd helped him, learned to swing a hammer, got blisters that turned to calluses. They'd worked side by side, every nail a promise. Inside, the table held 2 coffee cups, a half-finished letter, the book of poetry. Cole was learning to read it better. Grace taught him in the evenings, patient, kind. The town had softened. Martha brought meals once a week. The old ranchers had offered Cole work, good work, fair pay, respect. It was growing, slow and steady, not because of who Grace had been, but because of who they were. Together. Her father had visited. Once. He didn't apologize. Thomas Porter wasn't built that way, but he'd shaken Cole's hand, looked him in the eye. "Treat her right," Thomas said. "Every day," Cole replied. Thomas had left a deed on the table, 40 acres, adjacent to the land Cole rented. "Consider it a wedding gift," he'd said. "You earned it." Cole had stared at that deed for an hour after he left. Grace sat beside him, her head on his shoulder. "You don't have to take it." "I know." Cole folded the paper, careful. "But I will. Not for me. For us. For what we're building." Now, in the spring morning, Grace heard the door open. Cole stepped out, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He'd learned to make it better. Still strong, but not quite paint stripper anymore. He handed her a cup, stood beside her, looking at the garden. "Flowers survived," he said. They did. They stood in that comfortable silence, the kind that comes from knowing someone, truly knowing them, from building something together through cold and judgment and doubt. "You ever regret it?" Cole asked, his voice low. "Choosing." "This," Grace leaned into him. "Only life I got is the one we're building. That's enough." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. In the distance, the mountains rose, blue and eternal. Snow still crowned the peaks. But down here, the world was warming, green pushing through brown, life returning. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. "I was thinking," Cole said, "maybe we plant some apple trees. Take a few years, but we'd have fruit. Eventually." Grace smiled. "I'd like that. Planning for a future. Together." That night they sat on the porch, watching the stars come out. The air smelled of pine and wet earth, and possibility. Cole took Grace's hand. His fingers were rough from work, but his touch was gentle. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me. Not what I didn't have. What I did." Grace kissed his cheek. "You saved my life. You saved mine, too." Cole looked at the cabin, the garden, the mountains beyond. "This is more than I ever dreamed of." They sat until the stars filled the sky, uncountable, infinite, beautiful. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low and warm. 2 chairs at the table, 2 cups drying by the sink, 2 lives woven together. By choice, by work, by a love that didn't need gold to shine. They say love earned the hard way is the only kind that lasts. Maybe that's true. All Cole Dawson knew was this. When the storm came, he didn't think. He just moved. And when the town judged, Grace didn't flinch. She just stood. That was the kind of love that survived a Montana winter. That was the kind of love that made a home. Home wasn't where you were born. It was where you chose to stay when the wind blew hard. And here, in this rough-built cabin with wildflowers blooming and coffee brewing, and a woman beside him who'd chosen him over everything. This was home. The spring wind blew, gentle, through the pines. And Cole Dawson, the poor rancher with nothing but his word, he finally had everything that mattered. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.